Hey, hi, thanks for joining me in the second devlog. I'm making a third-person shooter game where you can transform and climb stuff. The to-do list for this month includes area transitions, sky and background elements, fixing the player hitbox, game flow and level design, and adding a jumping enemy robot. Also, I've been talking to an awesome sound designer, and so there will be a short sound design demo at the end. Before we jump into it, let's take a quick look at some feedback. To make the shooting feel better, I improved the muzzle flash and added some subtle screen shake. The main gun also got a bit of a makeover to make it look more futuristic. I've added some scraps when drones explode so they don't just disappear, and lowered the volume of their explosion sound. Also, I adjusted the big robot's leg ragdoll so it feels heavier. The big robot now stumbles when it loses a leg and it tries to crush the player. I've made the laser wider and it actually knocks back the player now. Finally, instead of just shooting its weak points, you actually have to climb the robot to destroy its legs, and I've added clearer visual clues to indicate the weak points. Now let's have a look at the first major update. I want there to be a logical progression between areas, so just fading to black and loading the next scene wasn't really an option. Instead, every area is located on a different planet, and I've added a machine that launches the player between planets. In this example you can see two planets, both of which have a machine pointing at the other planet. Basically what happens is machine 1 shoots the player up and machine 2 catches the player. Similarly, machine 2 can then shoot the player back and machine 1 can catch him. Implementing the system was relatively straightforward. As always, I started with some modeling. After modeling the transportation device, I put together an interaction system to allow the player to actually use it. I then coded the movement and camera behavior and finally added some particles and animations to bring it all together. Next up is making the sky more interesting. I do like the colors, but overall the sky looks kinda boring. Oftentimes in sci-fi scenes there's these large rings indicating distant planets. Those look cool, so I decided to add them to the game. To have full control over the look of the sky, I decided to put individual quads with flat texture showing the distant planets. I did have to use a custom shader to make sure the built-in fog isn't applied to the sky objects. The main issue with my approach was the camera render distance. Since the sky objects need to be far away, they would clip in and out the camera view all the time. To fix this, I'm now rendering the sky through a separate camera with a larger rendering distance. I figured increasing the rendering distance for the second camera is fine, as it only renders a few objects anyway. With the sky looking more interesting, it's time to move on to fixing the player hitbox. Currently, the player character has two different collision shapes, a capsule for the human form and a sphere for the creature. When switching between the two forms, it also switches the collision shape. Currently, the hit detection component is attached to the same object as the collision shapes, meaning the active collision shape also determines the hitbox. This would be fine if the collision shapes had a similar volume, however right now the collision shape is much larger for the creature form. This makes for gameplay that feels unfair, and so what I did is I made a separate trigger for the hit detection that functions independently from the collision shapes. The trigger is attached to the player body, so it will always be positioned correctly regardless of whether you're climbing or running. Now the gameplay feels much more fair. Now let's get into the game flow and level design. This month I actually made a fairly big decision by throwing away most of the story to make room for more open gameplay. I had just modeled some walls and towers for the first area when I started playing the pathless. Playing the pathless made me realize how important it is to give players choice. Moving from area to area without anything interesting in between probably gets boring quick. I want my game to have at least some interesting choices and branching paths. With this new game flow in mind, I also got started on a new area and attempted to effectively use verticality to encourage climbing and exploration. Okay, it's finally time to add a new enemy. I decided to make a procedurally animated jumping robot. Seeing as my terrain is quite vertical, this seemed like a pretty good way for enemies to traverse the level. As always, the first step was to do some modeling and texturing. With the model done, I moved on to setting up the basic movement. The movement is very similar to a couple robots I had made before, except for the fact that it has an uneven amount of legs. Since making the big robot in the previous devlog, my procedural animation script now supports 3 legs, so I decided to put it to use on this new enemy. The difference between 3 and 4 legs is that with 4 legs it moves in a zigzag pattern, whereas with 3 legs it only moves 1 leg at a time. Anyway, the animation worked perfectly first try, so I got to work on the jumping behavior. After an embarrassingly long time of trying random implementations, I got the jumping to work using Unity's built-in rigid body physics. Here's the robot jumping around in a new area. To finish up this devlog, let's talk about the game's sound design. As you probably noticed in the previous devlog, I'm not the best at creating sounds. Luckily, a very skilled sound designer by the name of Sonicbrat put together an awesome demo. He also made the sounds for the start of this devlog. Without further ado, here's a short demo of his work using clips from previous videos. That's it for the second devlog. I hope you enjoyed. Thanks for watching.